Millionaire meets little girl in hospital. What she asked him will break your heart. The rain drummed softly against the hospital windows, a steady rhythm that matched the ache in Ethan Walker's chest as he sat beside his mother's bed. The dim light from the monitor flickered across his tired face, revealing the exhaustion of sleepless nights and silent prayers. Tubes and wires surrounded the frail woman who had once been his strength, and the quiet hum of machines filled the air with an eerie reminder that even billionaires could not buy time. Ethan's tailored suit hung loosely on his shoulders, his tie undone, his eyes hollow from worry. For the first time in years, the man known for conquering boardrooms and building empires felt completely powerless. Success, wealth, fame, none of it mattered in this sterile room where the scent of disinfectant lingered like despair. His phone buzzed with messages from his assistants, but he ignored them all. Tonight, he wasn't a CEO. He was just a son, terrified of losing the only person who had ever loved him unconditionally. As the beeping of the heart monitor echoed faintly, Ethan stood and stepped into the dimly lit corridor, seeking air that didn't taste of sadness. The hallway stretched endlessly, lined with doors that hid countless stories of pain and hope. He walked aimlessly, his polished shoes clicking softly against the cold tiles until a small sound stopped him. The quiet sob of a child. Turning, he saw a little girl sitting near the vending machine, knees pulled to her chest, clutching a crumpled piece of paper and a broken pencil. Her clothes were slightly damp, her hair messy from tears, and her eyes, red and swollen, told a story of fear no child should ever know. Ethan hesitated, his heart tightening at the sight. He wasn't good with emotions. He'd spent years hiding behind power and professionalism. But something about that fragile figure drew him closer. Slowly he crouched down to her level, his voice soft and unsure. "Hey," he said gently, "are you okay?" The girl blinked up at him, sniffled, and wiped her cheeks with the back of her tiny hand. Her voice trembled as she whispered, barely audible over the rain, "Can you help me write a note to my mom?" Ethan's breath misted faintly in the cool hospital air as the little girl's trembling voice reached him. Her eyes, wide and glistening, carried a mix of fear and fragile hope that pierced through the walls he'd built around his heart. He lowered himself to one knee beside her, his expensive suit brushing against the sterile tiles, and offered her a small, reassuring smile. "Of course," he said softly. "What do you want to say?" The girl hesitated, clutching the paper closer to her chest before whispering, "My name's Lily. I'm 7. Her voice wavered as she continued, "Mom's in surgery, and I promised I'd leave her a note when she wakes up, but my hand hurts, and I can't spell big words." Ethan noticed the faint bandage wrapped around her small wrist, probably from some IV or a fall. She looked too young to be sitting here alone in this cold hallway, waiting for a miracle. Slowly she held out the broken pencil toward him, a fragile gesture of trust. He took it carefully, as though it was something sacred, not just a half-used pencil with bite marks. His large, steady hand contrasted sharply with her tiny fingers as he smoothed the wrinkled page she'd been holding so tightly. It was pink, decorated with unicorns and stars. So innocent, so far from the sterile grey world he lived in. For a moment, Ethan just looked at the paper, feeling strangely nervous, as if this note carried more weight than any contract he had ever signed. "All right, Lily," he said gently. "Tell me what you want to say." She bit her lip, thinking, her small brows furrowing in concentration. Then, slowly, she began to dictate, her voice trembling but filled with love. "Dear Mom," she began, pausing between each word as Ethan carefully wrote them down in neat, bold letters. "I'm being brave, just like you said. I'll wait right here for you. I love you to the moon and back." Her words were simple, but they held a purity that no poetry could match. Ethan's chest tightened as he wrote. His vision blurred for a moment, not from exhaustion, but from emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. When he finally lifted the pencil, he reread the note aloud, his voice softer than he expected. Lily smiled faintly through her tears, her eyes lighting up when she heard her words spoken out loud. "It's perfect," he whispered, handing her the note carefully, as if afraid to crease it. She looked at it, then at him, and for the first time that night, a small spark of warmth crossed her face. "You write pretty," she said shyly, tracing the letters with her finger. "You must be someone important." Ethan chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Not as important as your mum," he replied, his voice quiet but sincere. The words left his lips almost unconsciously, yet they carried truth deeper than he intended. For a long moment, they just sat there, a powerful man and a fragile little girl, both united by the same quiet fear of losing someone they loved. The hallway lights flickered above them, and the storm outside grew heavier. But inside that small circle of light, time seemed to pause. Ethan watched as Lily folded the note with care and pressed it against her chest, her lips moving in a silent prayer. He felt something stir within him, something unfamiliar yet grounding. Without realizing it, this little girl had reminded him of something priceless. Love written from the heart was stronger than anything money could buy. The hospital corridors grew quieter as the night deepened, the soft hum of machines and the rhythmic patter of rain against the windows forming a lullaby for the sleepless. Ethan sat nearby, watching Lily from a short distance as she sat curled up on the cold metal bench, her little backpack serving as a makeshift pillow. The pink note she had written for her mother was safely tucked under her arm, as though she feared it might disappear if she let go. Ethan's heart clenched at the sight. She looked far too small, far too fragile to carry such heavy sadness. He rose silently, his polished shoes echoing softly down the hall, and returned a few minutes later with a sandwich and a steaming cup of hot chocolate. When he approached, she blinked awake, startled for a moment before recognizing him. "You didn't eat anything," he said gently, holding out the food. "You'll feel better if you eat a little." She stared at the sandwich for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to accept it, then gave a shy nod. "Thank you," she murmured, her small hands trembling as she took it. Ethan sat beside her, not saying much, just quietly sharing the silence. The smell of cocoa filled the air, mixing with the sterile scent of disinfectant. For the first time that night, there was something comforting about the stillness between them. After a few bites, Lily glanced up at him, her curious eyes reflecting the dull hospital light. "Why are you here?" she asked softly, breaking the silence that had wrapped around them like a fragile thread. Ethan hesitated for a moment, unsure how to answer a question so simple yet so painful. Finally, he exhaled and said quietly, "My mom's sick too. I'm just waiting." Lily's expression softened immediately. "Oh," she whispered, her voice small and sincere. "Maybe our moms will get better together." The innocence of her words hit him like a wave. He forced a smile, though his throat tightened painfully. "Maybe they will," he said, though deep down, doubt flickered like a shadow. Hay sat in silence again, side by side, a man who had everything and a little girl who had almost nothing, yet both bound by the same aching hope. Lily finished her drink and leaned her head against her backpack again, her eyelids heavy. The lights above them dimmed slightly as the night staff moved quietly through the halls. Ethan glanced at the clock. Nearly 3 a.m. Outside, the rain had softened to a gentle drizzle, and thunder had faded into the distance. He thought about his office, the glass walls, the towering skyline, and realized how meaningless it all felt compared to this moment. The empire he had built could never fill the emptiness that fear had carved into his chest. As he turned back toward Lily, he noticed her trying to stay awake, her tiny fingers gripping the note even in her exhaustion. "You should get some sleep," he said softly. "You need rest." She shook her head weakly, whispering, "I want to wait for Mom." Her words were so full of faith that it almost broke him. Ethan didn't argue. He just sat beside her quietly, keeping watch as if his presence could somehow keep her safe. Minutes passed, and her breathing slowed as sleep finally claimed her. Just as her eyes began to close, her voice came again, soft, trembling, half dreaming. "If my mom doesn't wake up," she murmured, her hand tightening around the note, "will you still give her this?" Ethan froze. The question cut straight through him. He looked at her peaceful, tear-stained face and felt something twist inside his chest. The child's trust in him, a stranger, was both heartbreaking and sacred. For a long moment he couldn't find his voice. Finally he nodded, though she couldn't see him. "I promise," he whispered, his words heavy with emotion. He watched as her breathing steadied and her grip on the note loosened just enough for sleep to take over. As he leaned back against the wall, Ethan stared at the ceiling, the word promise echoing in his mind like a vow he couldn't take lightly. The rain outside began again, faint but steer, die, as if the heavens themselves were listening. The faint glow of dawn crept through the narrow hospital windows, casting pale stripes of light across the sterile floor. The storm had passed, leaving behind a stillness that felt almost unnatural. Ethan sat slumped in the hallway chair, his head resting against the wall, eyes heavy from a night without sleep. The distant hum of the machines inside his mother's room filled the silence like a soft, haunting melody. When the nurse gently touched his shoulder, he already knew before she spoke. "Mr. Walker," she whispered, her voice trembling with practiced sympathy. Ethan rose slowly, his heart sinking as he stepped inside the room. His mother lay peacefully, her face calm, as though she had simply drifted into a long, gentle sleep. For a moment, the world stood still. The beeping had stopped, the machines were silent, and the woman who had been his guiding light was gone. Ethan's throat tightened, his vision blurred, and though he had told himself he would be strong, tears came uninvited, sliding down his face in quiet defeat. He took her hand, still warm, and pressed it to his forehead. "You did your best, Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Rest now." The quiet around him grew heavier with each passing second until the sound of hurried footsteps shattered it. Doctors and nurses rushed down the hall, voices sharp and urgent. Ethan stepped out of his mother's room, instinctively following the commotion. His stomach twisted when he realized they had stopped at a room just a few doors away, Lily's mother's room. From behind the half-closed door came the flat, unbroken tone of a heart monitor, and then silence. Ethan's heart dropped. He didn't need words. He saw the truth in the nurse's eyes when she stepped out. The gentle shake of her head confirmed what he already feared. Lily's mother hadn't made it either. For a long moment, Ethan stood frozen in the hallway, the walls closing in around him. It was as though the entire world had conspired to break two hearts at once, his and that of a 7-year-old girl who had waited all night with a note of love. He turned slowly, staring toward the bench where she still slept, her small frame curled up under the hospital's harsh lights. The note was clutched tightly against her chest, her little face peaceful and unaware of the storm about to hit her world. Ethan's heart cracked open in a way he hadn't thought possible. He had lost his mother, but at least he had memories, years of love to hold on to. Lily would wake to emptiness. He took a deep breath, his legs unsteady as he approached her. The nurses watched from afar, their eyes soft with pity, but no one dared to wake her. Ethan knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. The innocence there made his chest ache. As the morning light brightened, Lily stirred, blinking awake with a sleepy smile. "Did Mom wake up yet?" she asked, her voice groggy but hopeful. Ethan's heart shattered all over again. He couldn't speak. The silence stretched too long, and realization began to creep into her small, innocent eyes. She turned toward her mother's room and saw the open door, the empty bed, the sheets folded neatly, the machines gone. Her lips parted, and then the sound came. a raw, broken cry that pierced straight through the quiet hall. "No, no, no," she sobbed, stumbling toward the doorway. Ethan caught her gently before she could go inside, wrapping his arms around her as she trembled violently. "Lily," he whispered, his own eyes burning. "Your mom, she's watching over you now. She's in heaven." The words felt hollow even as he said them, yet they were all he had to offer, a fragile truth wrapped in comfort. Lily shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks, her little voice cracking. Then can you give her my note when you go see your mom?" Edda. Han froze, her question striking a place in his soul that had already been torn wide open. His lips trembled as he looked down at her, this small, broken child clinging to a piece of paper as though it was the last thread that connected her to love. The note was wrinkled, its unicorn smudged, but it was still whole, just like the promise he had made. Without a word, he pulled her close, holding her tightly as she buried her face in his chest. His tears mingled with hers, falling silently onto her hair. "Yes, sweetheart," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. "I'll make sure she gets it." The hospital around them faded away. The noise, the people, the cold, leaving only a man and a child, bound by shared loss and an unspoken understanding. The morning sun rose higher, painting the world in gold. But for Ethan and Lily, it was a day wrapped in sorrow and a promise that would change both of their lives forever. The days that followed passed in a quiet haze, heavy with the kind of sorrow that seemed to cling to the air itself. The hospital corridors faded into memory, replaced by the muted tones of black suits, white flowers, and the soft murmur of prayers. 2 funerals, one for a mother who had raised a son into greatness, and another for a mother whose little girl still waited for her to wake up. Ethan stood between the 2 caskets, his eyes distant, his heart heavy with a grief that words could never express. The sky was grey that morning, clouds hanging low as if the heavens themselves were mourning alongside him. The scent of wet earth and lilies surrounded the small graveyard, and as the final prayers were spoken, Ethan's gaze shifted toward the smaller casket beside his mother's, Lily's mom. In his hand, he held a folded pink note, the one written on unicorn paper with uneven letters and tear-stained edges. He knelt down, brushing the surface gently before play, seeing it atop the polished wood. His voice came out low, almost a whisper carried by the wind. "This is from your brave little girl," he murmured, his throat tightening around every word. "She loves you more than you can imagine." The moment felt sacred, a bridge between 2 worlds, between a mother's love and a daughter's endless hope. As he rose to his feet, the paper fluttered slightly, catching a glint of sunlight before settling against the flowers. Ethan turned away slowly, his eyes lingering one last time on the graves before walking back toward his car. But as the doors closed and the engine started, he felt no peace, only a growing ache, an emptiness that wouldn't let him go. He couldn't stop seeing Lily's face, couldn't forget the way she had clung to him, the trust in her small voice when she made him promise. That promise now echoed in his heart louder than anything else. Days turned into a restless week. His mansion, usually filled with staff and silence, now felt colder than ever. Every corner seemed to remind him of something missing: laughter, warmth, the sound of someone small asking innocent questions. One evening, as he sat alone in his office, surrounded by success and silence, Ethan opened his laptop and began searching. He didn't even know where to begin, but he typed anyway. Orphanage near St. Mary's Hospital. Dozens of results appeared, but one name stood out: St. Anne's Home for Children. He hesitated only a moment before grabbing his coat and car keys. The drive was long, cutting through the outskirts of the city, past the gleaming towers he once called his empire. When he finally arrived, the orphanage stood quietly behind an old iron gate, its garden small but cared for, its windows glowing softly with evening light. Inside, the air smelled faintly of crayons and warm soup. Children's laughter echoed down the hallways, faint, distant, but alive. Ethan spoke with the caretaker, his deep voice betraying the emotion he tried to hide. "I'm looking for a little girl named Lily," he said. The woman smiled kindly, nodding. "Yes, she came here a few days ago. Sweet child, but very quiet." She gestured toward the courtyard, where a small figure sat on a wooden swing, her backpack resting beside her. Ethan's chest tightened as he approached. Lily was staring down at her shoes, drawing invisible shapes in the dirt with her feet. The pink notepad was still tucked into her bag, worn and folded at the corners. He stopped a few steps away, unsure for a moment how to speak. Then he took a slow breath and crouched down, holding out a small teddy bear, soft, white, and wrapped with a ribbon that said, "Be brave." His voice came gently, almost a whisper. "Remember me?" he asked. The little girl looked up, her eyes widening in disbelief. For a moment she froze. Then the bear slipped from her hands as tears welled up in her eyes. "You came back!" she cried, her voice breaking with emotion. Ethan opened his arms, and she ran to him without hesitation, burying her face in his chest. He held her tightly, his eyes closing as a wave of warmth and pain washed over him all at once. "Of course I came back," he said softly, resting his chin on her head. "I told you I'd make sure your mom got your note. And I did." Lily sniffled, clutching his jacket as if afraid he'd disappear again. "Can you stay this time?" she asked in a whisper, her voice fragile and full of longing. Ethan pulled back just enough to meet her gaze, his expression gentle, his heart already knowing the answer. A small, genuine smile broke through the sadness on his face as he brushed a tear from her cheek. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly. "Not anymore." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying away the last of the funeral bells in the distance, and for the first time in days, Ethan felt something stir in his heart. Not grief, but purpose. The promise he had made in that hospital hallway was no longer just words. It was becoming a new beginning. Months drifted by like pages of a quiet miracle, each one marked not by business meetings or wealth, but by the gentle rhythm of a child's laughter echoing through hallways that had once known only silence. Ethan Walker's mansion, once a monument to success and solitude, now felt alive. The marble floors that used to reflect nothing but the shine of chandeliers now carried the sound of small footsteps running from room to room. The air smelled of vanilla pancakes in the morning and hot cocoa at night. Every corner of the grand house seemed to breathe again, warmed not by luxury, but by the simple presence of a little girl who had taught a billionaire how to feel again. It had taken time, countless visits, and a mountain of paperwork. But the day the judge officially handed Ethan the guardianship papers, something in his heart settled for the first time since his mother's passing. When Lily called his name and threw her arms around his waist that day, his chest tightened with emotions words couldn't express. She wasn't just a responsibility. She was family now, his reason to come home. As weeks passed, Ethan's old life, the one filled with boardrooms, endless emails, and hollow achievements, began to fade into the background. He still ran his company, but his priorities had shifted. The world saw the same confident CEO, but behind closed doors, there was a man learning to braid hair, help with schoolwork, and listen to bedtime stories about princesses and rainbows. The house staff, once used to silence, now smiled at the sound of laughter bouncing through the halls. The dining room, where Ethan used to eat alone with his phone for company, now saw spilled milk, shared giggles, and the clinking of 2 cups of hot chocolate. The change was subtle but profound, a transformation not of space, but of soul. One afternoon, as the golden sun filtered through the tall windows, Ethan hung a small frame above the fireplace. Inside it was the pink unicorn notepaper, smoothed carefully and sealed behind glass. The childish handwriting was still clear. "Dear Mom, I'm being brave, just like you said." For a long moment, he just stood there, staring at it, remembering the night those words had been written. It wasn't just a note. It was a bridge between the past and the present, between two souls who had lost everything and somehow found each other. Lily had wandered into his life with a broken pencil and left him with a reason to smile again. The framed note became their symbol, a reminder that love was the true wealth neither of them had known they were searching for. As night fell, the mansion glowed softly under the warm lights. Lily's laughter echoed down the hall as she chased her small golden retriever, a gift from Ethan on her first day at school. "No, Max, that's my sock," she giggled, her voice carrying through the halls like music. Ethan watched from the doorway, a faint smile playing on his lips. The sight of her happiness filled him with a quiet pride that no business success had ever given him. Later, when the stars had taken their places outside and the city lights flickered in the distance, Ethan tucked Lily into bed. She clutched her teddy bear close, the same one he had given her at the orphanage, and looked up at him with sleepy eyes, full of peace. "Ethan," she murmured softly, "do you think our moms can see us?" Her question lingered in the air, gentle and pure, touching the deepest corner of his heart. He paused, his hand brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. For a moment, his gaze drifted toward the window, where the moonlight spilled across the room like silver silk. "I think they can," he said quietly, his voice filled with warmth, "and I think they're smiling right now." Lily smiled faintly, her eyelids growing heavy. Then, "I hope they know we're okay." Ethan leaned down, kissed her forehead and whispered, "They do, sweetheart, they do." As she drifted into sleep, Ethan remained seated by her bedside. He thought of his mother, the way she used to hold his hand when life felt too heavy, and of Lily's mother, whose final gift was the strength she left behind in her little girl. They were gone, but somehow their love still lingered, woven into the threads of the life they had built together. When Ethan finally rose, he walked quietly down the hall and stopped by the fireplace once more. The house was silent now, the only sound the faint ticking of the old clock. The framed pink note glowed gently in the firelight, the ink shimmering under the glass as though touched by something divine. Ethan smiled softly, his eyes wet but peaceful. He reached out and traced the edge of the frame with his fingertips. "You were right, Mom," he whispered. "Love really is the only thing that lasts." The flames crackled softly, casting a warm golden glow across the words, "Dear Mom, I'm being brave, just like you said." Outside, the wind rustled the trees, carrying with it the sound of distant laughter from a dream. Inside, in the home that had once been a monument to wealth, there now lived something far more precious, the unbreakable bond of two hearts that had found healing in each other. And as the night settled, the camera faded out slowly, lingering on the glowing note, a silent testament to a promise kept and a new beginning born from love.